We begin in the Middle East, where there are fears whether a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah is working or not in Lebanon. The truce, which has raised questions of a collapse, comes after deadly airstrikes by Israel and a mortar attack by Hezbollah forces. On Monday, Lebanon's health ministry said 10 people were killed in the south after the Israeli military carried out its biggest wave of airstrikes since both sides agreed to end the conflict last week. Commenting on the attack, Israel said it struck Hezbollah fighters, launchers, and infrastructure and urged Lebanese authorities to prevent what it called the group's hostile activity. Hezbollah, on the other hand, had earlier fired 2 mortars at an Israeli army base in a disputed border area, saying that they were warning over what it saw as repeated violations by Israel. Meanwhile, the United States, which helped broker that ceasefire deal with France, believes the truce has been successful so far. U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller says Washington and France will investigate reports of potential violations in the coming days.
Everyone had a nice break. What we have seen since the ceasefire went into effect is it being successful. Broadly speaking, it has been successful in stopping the fighting and getting us on a path where we are not seeing the just daily loss of life that we had seen for 2 months prior. Now, with respect to violations or potential violations of the ceasefire, we set a mechanism up to look into this very question, where the United States, along with France, will engage with the Israeli military, will engage with the Lebanese military to look at potential violations. We obviously anticipated that there might be violations because anytime, or nearly any time, you have a ceasefire of this nature, you have either claimed violations of the ceasefire, especially in the opening weeks when things are very fragile, or you have real violations of a ceasefire. So what we are doing is engaging through this mechanism to look at all of these reports of violations of the ceasefire and deal with them through the channels that the mechanism set up, and that's what we'll do over the coming days.
And as Lebanon and Israel trade accusations of the ceasefire breaches, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar says Israel is enforcing the truce deal to end war with Iran-backed Hezbollah in Lebanon and not violating it. He noted that Israel is keen to ensure the successful completion of the agreement.
We hear claims that Israel is violating the ceasefire understandings in Lebanon. On the contrary, Israel is enforcing them in response to Hezbollah's violations, which demand immediate action. For example, when armed Hezbollah terrorists are identified in southern Lebanon or when they attempt to move weapons. Their presence south of the Litani River is the most basic violation of the understandings. Hezbollah terrorists must not be present south of the Litani. They must move north immediately. I want to emphasize, Israel is committed to the successful implementation of the ceasefire, but we will not accept a return to the situation as it stood on October 6, 2023. If violations occur, Israel will enforce.
Let's turn our attention now to the war in Gaza, where the United States stresses the humanitarian situation there is dire and horrific. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, who's also December's UN Security Council president, says the world will continue to work together to ensure an end to the war and, most importantly, bring back the remaining hostages.
The situation in Gaza will be at the top of our focus. We will continue our relentless diplomacy to bring an end to this conflict and bring the remaining hostages home. We will continue to work around the clock to alleviate the suffering of the Palestinian people. Our diplomatic efforts continue. I can't tell you exactly where the talks are. I can tell you that those efforts are continuing to be made with the hopes that we can get to a resolution. And on the humanitarian situation, again, the situation is dire. We are not in any way playing down how dire the situation is, but we're also on the ground every single day, working to find a solution, working to ensure that food and other necessary assistance is being delivered to the Palestinian people. And more needs to be done in that area, and we're going to continue to work on that. I can't respond to this other than to say that we have worked with the court in the past, but we do believe that this particular case against the Israelis is not justified. What we will be working for is a diplomatic solution on the ground. We have people on the ground working around the clock to try to find a path to a ceasefire in Gaza and bring home the hostages and deal with the horrific humanitarian situation on the ground. We have never given up on that. And I can assure you this administration will be working on this until we succeed or until we walk out the door on January 20th. And I hope we succeed. We're working to succeed. And then on the situation in Lebanon, we're moving forward. There has been an agreement. There have been some hiccups, but the agreement is still standing, and we're looking forward to monitoring the situation on the ground to ensure that the situation continues, the ceasefire continues to be honored.
In another development, Egypt has hosted an international conference to canvass for humanitarian support for Gaza, devastated by more than a year of war between Hamas and Israel, and faces dire consequences as winter sets in. Many senior regional and Western officials attended the conference in Cairo, among whom were the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed and other senior UN officials. Participants observed that the humanitarian situation has greatly deteriorated in Gaza, especially in the Strip's northern areas, which have been mostly cut off for over a month. Meanwhile, UNRWA, the main aid provider for Palestinians, is halting aid deliveries through Kerem Shalom, the main cargo crossing into Gaza, due to threats of armed gangs looting the convoys. Well, that conference in Egypt is holding on the backdrop, as we rightly said, of the biggest UN agency providing aid to Palestinians announcing it's suspending deliveries through the main crossing between Israel and Gaza because of security concerns. Head of UNRWA, Philippe Lazzarini, said 2 recent convoys had been looted by armed gangs near the Kerem Shalom crossing and called on Israel to maintain law and order. Israel has previously said it facilitates the passage of aid into Gaza and accuses Hamas of hijacking and stealing the deliveries. Joining us now is international affairs analyst Dr. Charles Chukwunaru. He's in Calgary, Canada, from where he joins us. Dr. Charles, great to have you on the program today.
Yeah, Marachi, thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. And this is right up your alley, isn't it, as a humanitarian yourself? The devastation that could be in Gaza right now, knowing that the UN has halted humanitarian aid to the Strip.
Well, Marachi, you use the right word there, devastating. It can't be more devastating than it is right now. My heart bleeds for the hundreds of thousands and even up to 1 million, because the entire Gaza Strip is a huge IDP camp right now. So we are no longer talking about people living in tents alone. The entire Strip is now a huge IDP camp. And what bothers me really about the situation is that there is total breakdown of law and order, in addition to food scarcity, lack of medicine, and medical facilities. There are nursing mothers. There are pregnant women. There are disabled people. There are elderly people with mobility challenges. Why you see the young men out on the streets, scrambling, looking for food to fend for the women and children? Who takes care of the elderly? Who takes care of the nursing mothers? The children are malnourished. Their mothers are malnourished. They cannot even breastfeed their children properly due to malnutrition. You can imagine a malnourished mother breastfeeding a malnourished child. And this is happening now in the world where we all live in. I'm not even talking about psychosocial and mental health support to these displaced individuals. Who is thinking about their mental health? What's going to be the fate of the children born and raised in this condition? I don't, the more I think about it, my heart bleeds. So now we are even entering the winter season. The temperature in Gaza as of today is going to be as low as 12 degrees Celsius. The winter time, you can see how I'm dressed. I'm in my house and I'm dressed the way I am because it's the winter time in Canada. Imagine the winter season in Gaza with people on the street, with people in tents, living in tents. Are we talking about the sexual abuse, the rape? Who is looking after these women and children? I keep asking. See, in an IDP or refugee, the word refugee and IDP is used interchangeably, but technically, refugees are those who are displaced, who have crossed the border to a different country. IDPs are those who are displaced from their homes while within their country. The refugees even are better because they enjoy some rights, or they enjoy some convention rights in their host countries. But the situation of IDPs, I just wanted to make this clarification so that we know the difference between refugees and IDPs. In Gaza, we are talking about IDPs who have no rights. There is an absence of law and order. Women and young children, young girls are being, you are not going to see all this reported in the media. My most worry, okay, look at people's homes. Now ask yourself, the people who own these homes, where are they today?
They've been displaced. That's the situation. They have been displaced. And thank you so much for painting the picture.
Who is looking after them? And majority of them are women and children because most of the men are fighting, either in war front or gang or have been killed. If you go to these IDP camps, 90% are women and children, fatherless children, widowed women.
Thank you for painting the picture, making it real to many of us on this side of the world. And indeed, with the cold season, you really have to think about how these people will get through, the change in weather, and they're open to the elements and so on. But the security reason, we know, doesn't really have anything to do with the Israeli Defense Forces at this time, but with the Palestinian armed groups that are present in Gaza. They're the ones who are rushing and looting aid from the UN aid convoys that are coming into Gaza. Over 100 of them have been stalled and prevented from passing through that crossing between Israel and Gaza because of these aid groups. Now, I know this is also one of the outcomes of the war, but who is to blame for the breakdown of law and order in this place? Because ideally, Hamas was supposedly in control of Gaza, but with what is going on now, it's clear that it is not just the Israeli Defense Forces, who are on the ground trying to get rid of Hamas, but there are other smaller groups that have vested interest in this war.
Yes, Israel cannot be discharged from liability in this circumstance because, like you rightly said, Israel is trying to get rid of Hamas. And I did ask this question in your interview last year. What happens after you've destroyed Hamas? So the responsibility of providing security lies with the occupying force in this circumstance.
Yeah, but Israel is not occupying Gaza. You see, that's why this is really difficult to figure out. Israel is not occupying Gaza.
Yeah, on paper, that is how it sounds on paper. But who is occupying Gaza? Who is providing now? Who is in charge of security in Gaza right now? Okay, let me answer your question because it's a very tricky situation you have out there. Who is to blame? For me, Iran. They masterminded this conflict in the first place. Secondly, Hamas. Thirdly, Israel. So right now, the blame should go to these three parties who, by omission and commission, brought Gaza to the situation it is right now. Okay, now when some of us were asking, what happens after Hamas? That question has not been answered. People think we're just talking theory. That question has not been answered.
But the war is not over, Doctor. The war is not over. It's still continuing in the Gaza Strip. I mean, it is heartbreaking seeing all of that devastation, but the war still continues. And as I also rightly pointed out, there are armed groups in Gaza right now who are the reason why these humanitarian, why these people who do need aid are not getting the aid that they need because of the presence of these armed groups in Gaza.
Okay, now this is reminiscent of what you had in Iraq and what you had in Libya. You rightly said that Israel is trying to get rid of Hamas. So the Hamas as a policing authority has been destroyed to a very large extent. So what usually happens, it has happened everywhere. I've studied most of the conflicts in the world, right, since the turn of the 19th century. This is what usually happens. Where there is state collapse, where there is collapse of law and order, where there is anarchy. Like you rightly said, Israel is trying to get rid of Hamas. That's a true statement. And he has succeeded in decimating Hamas as a governing authority. Israel has succeeded in destroying to a very large extent the power of Hamas to police Gaza. So who is policing Gaza now? Nobody. And that is why, anyway, before we end this program, we have to look at the way forward. Gaza, okay, just like UNRWA, you don't blame the humanitarian aid workers. On Saturday, they said, UNRWA said that they attempted to ship in 5 trucks of humanitarian aid into Gaza, and they were all looted by armed gangs. Yeah. And this area is under Israeli control. Immediately after the Karim Shalom crossing, you have Israeli control. There's a buffer zone. But be that as it may, whether in Khan Yunis, whether in Rafah, whether in Central Gaza, whether in Gaza City, there should be law and order. People are hungry. In fact, any attempt to bring in aid into Gaza now is a waste of time. I'm on the side of UNRWA on this occasion because it will be looted. There is lawlessness. There are arms. This is what some of us warned at the beginning. If you recall last year in your program, there are armed gangs everywhere right now.
Dr. Charles Chukwunaru, thank you so much. The heart of a humanitarian, of course, understands fully well what's going on in Gaza and the devastation on the ground as people are unable to get aid at this time. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much. I wish we had more time.
There never is enough time. Thanks again.
It's a long book now there, Amarachi. There is need for a multi-dimensional peace support operations right now with troops. There should be troops contribution from all over the world while Israel is withdrawing. Another, whether it's going to be UN force or whether it's going to be US or whoever it is, there must be policing, there must be peace and order. Without peace, there cannot, people will just be dying like flies.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you again for your thoughts and for your analysis. Thank you.